That morning, I walked into the bathroom half asleep, thinking only about brushing my teeth and getting on with another workday. The light came in sharp through the blinds, slanting across the counter where Rachel had left her makeup bag open. That's when I saw it. A tiny foil tab from a birth control pack, stamped Tuesday. It caught the sunlight like a coin on a sidewalk, harmless to anyone else. But to me, it was a nail through the floorboards of my life. I froze. My brain split into two gears: the man I had been for 9 years of marriage, and the man I was about to become. Rachel and I had made an agreement long ago. After my vasectomy, she stopped the pill. No reason to keep pumping her body with hormones when there was no chance of pregnancy. That deal was ironclad, as certain as the ring on my finger. Yet here was proof she'd kept it going, quiet and hidden. There are only two explanations for something like that. 1. She was sleeping with someone else and needed the insurance. 2. Ethan and Chloe, the two kids who called me dad, had never carried a drop of my blood from the very beginning. I didn't let my face twitch. My hands were steady as I set the foil tab back in the exact spot where I'd found it. My heart wanted to explode right there in the tiled silence. 9 years of breakfasts, bedtime stories, mortgage payments, and anniversaries rattled in my chest like loose screws in a washing machine. But anger isn't useful unless you shape it. I've spent my career as an engineer, designing, measuring, troubleshooting. You don't scream at the problem. You study it. So I made a decision right there, toothbrush still dry in my hand. I wouldn't confront her. Not yet. I wouldn't stumble in with accusations and give her the chance to spin lies, cry, or twist it back on me. I would stay calm, steady, and deliberate. I would collect the truth the same way I'd approach a failed system at work. Gather evidence, verify every assumption, design the fix. When Rachel walked in later with her robe tied loose, humming some tune like nothing was wrong, I greeted her with the same half-smile I'd worn for years. She poured coffee, asked about my day, and kissed me on the cheek before leaving for her morning run. I gave nothing away, but inside, I already knew life had split down the middle. There was a man who believed his wife, and there was the man who had just found a piece of tinfoil telling him that belief was a luxury he could no longer afford. At work, I put on a mask. Hard hat, safety glasses, clipboard under my arm, the usual armor of a man who makes sure the world doesn't collapse under its own weight. Meetings, drawings, signatures, nodding at problems I didn't hear. My body went through the motions while my mind ran failure analyses on my marriage. 9 years, 2 kids, 1 wife. How many lies had slipped between those numbers? If Rachel could lie about something as fundamental as birth control, what else was I living blind to? My coworkers thought I was staring at blueprints. I was really drafting a new kind of schematic, one that didn't involve steel beams but deception, leverage, and proof. By lunch, I had a checklist scratched out on a yellow pad. Hidden cameras, small enough to vanish in plain sight. DNA kits, 3 swabs, no questions asked. Phone data tools, the kind that leave no trace. Airtight documentation of every step, every finding. These weren't just purchases. They were tools of survival. Packages would ship to the office, never the house. The house wasn't mine anymore, not really. It was a stage and I was the actor rehearsing a part. That night, I sharpened the mask. Attentive husband, unshaken father, unreadable man. I asked Rachel about her day. I kissed Chloe on the forehead, helped Ethan with his math homework, and smiled through the bedtime routine. I was the same man they'd always known, except now, every word I spoke was layered with calculation. I reminded myself of the stakes. If I was wrong, if this was some terrible misunderstanding, I would protect the marriage and patch the cracks. But if I was right, if the foil tab in the sunlight was what I thought it was, then I would protect my future at all costs. No rash moves, no screaming fights in the kitchen, just patience, precision, and preparation. I sat up late, long after Rachel had fallen asleep, and rehearsed in silence. My face in the bathroom mirror was unreadable, a stranger I could trust. Controlled anger is an advantage. Panic is a weakness. I knew which side of that line I was going to live on. Rachel told me she was taking the kids to the park that Saturday morning. Her voice was casual, the same way she always said it. But now I measured every syllable, every glance, every motion. The moment the front door shut, I was moving. I'd already mapped the house in my head, every corner that could hold a camera without raising suspicion. The bathroom smoke detector came first. I popped it open, slid a pinhole lens inside, and sealed it clean. One down. The bedroom dresser gave me the second angle, catching both the bed and the doorway. The third went in the living room, tucked into the bookshelf between Rachel's cookbooks and the photo album from our 10th anniversary. I drilled, mounted, wired, and cleaned with the precision of a man building a bridge over a canyon. By the time Rachel came back, the house looked exactly the same. Except it wasn't. Now it was an observation deck, and I was the unseen witness. That night, when the kids were finally asleep and Rachel was scrolling her phone in bed, I slipped into their rooms one by one. My hands didn't feel like mine as I swabbed Ethan's cheek, then Chloe's. They stirred but didn't wake. I swabbed my own cheek last, sealing the 3 envelopes and pressing down hard on the adhesive like it was a vow. In the morning, I dropped them in the mailbox before heading to work. The weight of it all sat on me like wet concrete. I went through the motions at the office, spec sheets, load calculations, another round of budget approvals. But the truth was, I was living in silence. Not the quiet of peace, but the suffocating hush that comes before a storm you know is going to level the town. When I looked at Rachel across the dinner table that night, I forced my eyes to stay steady. She laughed at something Chloe said, tucked her hair behind her ear, and reached for her glass of wine. To anyone else, she was just a tired mother winding down after a long day. To me, she was a question wrapped in flesh and memory. The cameras would answer what words couldn't. The DNA would answer what love refused to. And me? I was no longer a husband waiting for explanations. I was an engineer wiring a system for truth, preparing to survive whatever those answers turned out to be. The first week of footage gave me nothing but the ordinary. Rachel folding laundry, helping Ethan with his spelling words, laughing at some cooking show while she stirred a pot of chili. To anyone else, it would look like a wife and mother tending her home. But I wasn't watching as a husband. I was watching as an investigator waiting for the slip. Came on a Thursday. Rachel walked into the bedroom with that same serenity she always carried, except her eyes darted toward the corner vent near the nightstand. She crouched, lifted the grate, and slid something inside before heading to the shower. I rewound it 3 times just to be sure. Not jewelry, not papers. A phone. That night, I waited until she stepped into the bathroom again, shower water roaring loud enough to mask my footsteps. I knelt by the vent, pried the cover loose, and pulled it out. A second phone, burner style, still warm from her hand. My fingers didn't shake as I connected it to my laptop, cloning every byte. The whole process took less than 2 minutes. Then I slipped it back before the steam had cleared from the mirror. Later, under the dim glow of my screen, I opened the mirrored files. Messages lined up like bricks in a wall built to keep me out. His name never appeared, just a contact marked with an emoji. But the words told me everything. Hotel Friday? Same place. God. I love how easy this is. Can you believe Jake doesn't suspect a thing? That one hit like a rebar through the chest. I sat back in my chair, staring at it, then scrolled on. Inside jokes at my expense. Plans made while I tucked kids into bed. Pictures that left no doubt about what kind of meetings they'd been having. My eyes burned, but not from tears. It was the heat of rage pressing up behind them. I rubbed them hard, wiped once, and kept reading. Every line was another nail in the coffin of the life I thought I had. By dawn, I knew 2 things with certainty. Rachel was not the woman she pretended to be. She had no idea who she was married to. She thought I was a fool in the dark. She was about to find out I'd wired the whole damn house for daylight. I knew I couldn't carry this alone much longer. One wrong move, one slip of anger, and Rachel would smell the smoke before I struck the match. So I confided in the one person I trusted, Laura Bennett, my project lead. She was sharp, discreet, and steady under pressure. When I laid out what I'd found, she didn't gasp or pity me. She just looked me in the eye and said, "You need an attorney who won't flinch." That's how I ended up in Sandra Miller's office. A woman with ice-water composure and a reputation for winning knife fights in family court. Sandra didn't waste time. If she's hiding a second phone, she's hiding more. We need surveillance, not speculation. Within 24 hours, I'd staged a fake work trip to Portland and hired a private investigator. While Rachel thought I was out of state, the PI parked a van down the street and waited. The report landed on my desk 2 days later. Photos, timestamps, video. I flipped through the pages until my stomach locked up. There was a man pulling into my driveway, unlocking the door with a key, walking in like he owned the place. The video file played, and the image hit me harder than any fist ever had. Ethan bolted across the living room, shouting, "Daddy Tom, my son, my boy," wrapped his arms around the intruder's waist like it was the most natural thing in the world. The camera zoomed, and the face came clear. Tom Reynolds, Rachel's direct supervisor, the man who signed her paychecks, the man I'd shaken hands with at company dinners. My hands went cold. My chest didn't heave, my throat didn't scream. It was worse than that. It was a silence so sharp it cut. This wasn't some cheap fling at a motel. This was a second life, being lived inside my own walls, right under my roof with my kids calling another man daddy. I closed the file, slid the report across to Sandra, and sat back in my chair. She studied me for a moment, waiting for a crack. But my face didn't move. "This is war," I said finally. And for the first time since the foil tab in the sunlight, I felt steady. 48 hours after the PI's report, my phone buzzed with the email I'd been waiting for and dreading in equal measure. Subject line, "Paternity results, confidential." I sat at my desk with the blinds drawn, the office silent except for the hum of the HVAC. I opened the PDF and the numbers glared back at me in the sterile language of science. 0% probability of paternity for both Ethan and Chloe. The words didn't scream. They didn't curse. They simply stated, with absolute certainty, that I was not their father. The room tilted. My hand tightened around the armrest until my knuckles cracked. 9 years collapsed into a single moment. First steps, school plays, fevers soothed in the night. Every memory I had with those kids suddenly existed in a different light. I had been there for all of it, but I hadn't been what I thought I was. Rachel had stolen that truth from me before Ethan had even drawn his first breath. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. The anger was too clean for that now. It felt like steel cooling after the forge, hard, final, unbreakable. My jaw set, and I forwarded the report to Sandra Miller with the subject, "Proceed." She called within minutes. "Jake, I need you to listen closely. This isn't just betrayal. This is fraud, and it's legally actionable. We're dealing with adultery, intentional misrepresentation, and years of financial exploitation. With Reynolds identified, we also have grounds for alienation of affection. And because he's her direct supervisor, the company's non-fraternization policy puts them on the hook too. This is more than divorce. It's a battlefield." Her words were cold comfort, but they were fuel. I needed structure, a plan, a way to turn this chaos into control. "Walk me through it," I said. Sandra's voice was calm, methodical. "Step 1. Secure your business. Your construction firm is your lifeline, and Rachel has no claim to it beyond marital property. We move assets into a holding company, restructure debt to put leverage on the bank, and buy out your silent partners. No loose ends. Step 2. Legal preparation. We file for divorce on grounds of adultery and fraud. Step 3. Civil action. We pursue Tom for alienation of affection and the company for policy violation. And Jake, step 4 is psychological. You need to hold steady. Don't give her any ammunition." "I'm steady," I told her. And I was. For the first time in weeks, the fog was gone. That night, I didn't look at Rachel the same way. She poured herself a glass of wine, asked about my day, kissed Chloe's forehead, and smiled like she hadn't detonated our lives. I watched her tuck the kids in and wondered if she had any idea how close the walls were closing in. In the basement, I went through the motions Sandra laid out. I signed buyout paperwork, shifting shares into a new entity with only my name on it. I moved accounts, protected assets, and restructured obligations until the business was ironclad. Every stroke of the pen felt like pulling bricks out of the house Rachel thought she lived in. The anger stayed sharp, but it no longer controlled me. It was a tool now, something I could point where it mattered. I wasn't just reacting to betrayal, I was preparing to end it on my terms. When the kids fell asleep, I stood at their doorframes watching them breathe. Ethan's hair stuck up in every direction. Chloe had her thumb in her mouth, clutching the stuffed rabbit I'd bought her on her second birthday. My chest ached, but it wasn't confusing anymore. It was grief wrapped in resolve. They weren't mine in blood, but I'd been the one there. No test could take away the nights I carried them, the mornings I packed their lunches, the love I gave freely. But Rachel had poisoned even that. She'd built a lie so complete that it swallowed my name from their DNA. That was unforgivable. The next morning, I stood straighter when I walked into the office. The email had ended a story, yes, but it had also written the first line of a new one. I wasn't the man who'd been deceived anymore. I was the man preparing for war. Sandra had said it best. This was a battlefield, and I'd spent my whole life learning how to build things that lasted, how to stand firm when pressure tested every seam. Now I was going to apply those same skills to tearing down a marriage built on lies. When Rachel walked into the kitchen that evening and kissed my cheek, I didn't flinch. I smiled, asked her about her day, and tucked away the knowledge that in 48 hours, she'd be holding papers instead of wine. The DNA report hadn't just destroyed the past. It had cleared the way for the future, and I was ready to fight for it. We planned it down to the minute. Sandra believed in precision strikes, not messy brawls. Service at 10 a.m., she said. Everyone gets hit at once. Rachel, Tom, and his company. No leaks, no warning. That morning, I stood in my office staring at the clock. The second hand swept past the 12, and I pictured the process servers fanning out like soldiers on a battlefield. At 10:01, Rachel would be standing in the kitchen, sipping her coffee, when the knock came. By 10:02, Tom would be in his glass-walled office, smiling at some assistant, until the envelope landed in his hands. At 10:03, the HR director at his company would be holding a packet that spelled out in black and white how their star manager had been betting a subordinate and destroying 2 families in the process. 10:05, my phone lit up. Rachel. I let it buzz twice before answering. Her voice broke through the line, jagged and frantic. Jake, what is this? What the hell is going on? I kept my tone flat. Talk to your lawyer. Jake, please. Don't. You made your choices. Now live with them. I hung up. My hand didn't tremble and my chest didn't ache. If anything, it felt like breathing clean air for the first time in years. By noon, she was at the house, pounding on the front door. I opened it just far enough for her to see me, but not far enough for her to step inside. You can't just shut me out, she cried, her voice sharp and shaking. I already have, I said. Leave, Rachel, or I'll have security escort you off the property. Her eyes widened like she didn't recognize the man standing in front of her. That made 2 of us. I didn't recognize him either, but I liked him better than the fool I'd been. The nanny tried slipping in behind her, all crocodile tears and apologies. Jake, I never meant. You're done, I said, cutting her off. Get your things and go. You covered for them. You're out. By late afternoon, Rachel played her next card. She filed for a restraining order, claiming I was a threat. Sandra walked into court that same day, cool as ice, carrying files thicker than a phone book. The judge read through the evidence, the PI's photos, the phone logs, the DNA report, and dismissed Rachel's petition on the spot. Mrs. Collins, the judge said, this looks like a projection. I suggest you prepare to defend yourself, not vilify your husband. Rachel's face went pale in the courtroom. Mine stayed stone. The hardest blow came later, when my mother called. Her voice was heavy with disbelief. Jake, how can you abandon your children like this? They need you. I closed my eyes, holding the phone tight. They're not mine, Mom. Not by blood. Not by truth. Rachel lied. The tests are clear. There was a pause on the other end, a silence so deep it hummed through the line. Then she whispered, "Oh my God," and hung up. That silence stayed with me longer than Rachel's tears or Tom's smirk ever could. But silence is just another kind of steel. It hardens you, makes you sharper. And I needed every ounce of steel to finish what I'd started. The fallout spread quickly. Tom's wife served him her own papers by evening. His company's HR department launched a formal investigation. Rumors buzzed through Rachel's office like hornets in a jar. And me? I went home, cracked a beer, and sat on the porch while the sun set. For the first time since the foil tab glinted in the bathroom light, I felt something close to peace. Not because the war was over, but because I knew the first blows had landed clean. Sandra called to confirm. Restraining order dismissed, service confirmed, investigation launched. Everything's in motion. You did good today, Jake. I looked out over the street, the sky bleeding orange and purple. We're just getting started. The walls closed in on Tom Reynolds faster than even I expected. Corporate HR had no appetite for scandal, especially when I dropped the dossier Sandra had prepared. Text logs, hotel receipts, sworn PI statements, and the kicker, video of Tom using his key to stroll into my house like it was his own. Add in Ethan's voice calling him Daddy Tom, and the executives paled. The company had invested millions in its squeaky clean brand, and now their golden boy was radioactive. By Friday, Tom was terminated effective immediately. HR dressed it up with words like policy violation and breach of trust, but we all knew the truth. He destroyed his own career between my sheets. Sandra didn't let the momentum slow. Jake, this is where we press the advantage. They'll want to bury this quickly, but we make them pay for every inch. The company's attorneys called her within hours, voices tight, offering settlement talks before word leaked to investors. Sandra pushed back, her tone measured but merciless. Your client violated your own non-fraternization rules, cost my client 9 years of fraudulent marriage, and humiliated him in front of his children and community. We're not talking pennies. We're talking damages that acknowledge the theft of a man's life. Tom tried reaching out once, a pathetic voicemail dripping with false bravado. Jake, let's be men about this. No need to drag everyone through the mud. I didn't bother replying. The only answer he got came through court filings that listed him as a defendant under alienation of affection. Weeks blurred into meetings, signatures, depositions. Each day I woke with the same fire in my chest, the controlled anger that had kept me steady since the foil tab. I channeled it into every negotiation, every late-night review of documents. Sandra handled the courtroom battles. I secured my business empire like a fortress. Not one asset left vulnerable, not one debt unshielded. The settlements finally crystallized. Tom cut a check big enough to make his eyes water. The company paid even more, desperate to close the file and prevent shareholders from sniffing out the scandal. They thought money could erase the stain, but I knew better. No check could buy back the years I'd been robbed of. Still, I took it. Stability mattered. My employees depended on me, and with those funds, payroll and expansion were safe for years. Rachel, stripped of leverage, signed her own settlement under Sandra's sharp eye. She fought, of course, claimed she deserved spousal support, that the kids still needed me. Sandra calmly slid the DNA report across the table. Fraud voids entitlement, Mrs. Collins. You forfeited your claim the day you hid the truth. Rachel's lawyer whispered in her ear, and the fight drained from her face. The house was the last piece. The place I had built brick by brick, the rooms I had painted by hand, the backyard where I taught Ethan to ride a bike. It had become a crime scene of memory. I couldn't breathe inside it anymore, so I sold it fast, signed the papers without ceremony, handed over the keys, and walked out without looking back. I took a spare room at Laura Bennett's place. She didn't hover or pry. She just offered kindness without needing an explanation, and that was enough. Some nights we sat in silence, sipping whiskey while the TV flickered in the background. Other nights she'd cook, and we'd laugh about something at work. Her presence was steady, clean, untainted by betrayal. I slept lighter now, but I slept honestly. No cameras hidden in the walls. No second phone buzzing in the vents. No lies curling through the air like smoke. Just the sound of my own breathing, steady and free. The settlements didn't heal the wound, but they built scaffolding around it. They gave me the means to rebuild, to ensure Rachel and Tom's treachery didn't leave me hollow or broke. They reminded me that accountability has a cost, and I'd made damn sure they paid it. One evening, Sandra called to close the loop. Everything's finalized, Jake. Company settlement secured, Tom's payment transferred, divorce decree pending. You've got your foundation back. I sat on Laura's porch, listening to the cicadas rise up in the dusk. It's not the same foundation, I said, but it'll hold. And for the first time in months, I believed it. The divorce decree arrived in a thin white envelope that barely weighed an ounce, yet it felt heavier than steel. I slid it open at my desk, read the stamped words, and set it down without ceremony. 9 years of marriage reduced to a handful of pages. No speeches, no reconciliation, no illusions. Just the legal end to a story that had rotted long before I found the foil tab in the bathroom light. That evening, the office was quiet after everyone else had gone home. I stayed behind, catching up on numbers, when Laura stepped into the doorway. She didn't ask how I was holding up. She didn't tell me things would get better. She just crossed the room, placed a hand on my shoulder, and kissed me. Gentle, honest, unhurried. There was no disguise in it. No agenda, no manipulation. It was the first touch I'd felt in years that didn't carry a lie under its skin. Later, sitting on her porch with the night settling in around us, I thought about something my urologist had said years back. Vasectomy reversals often succeed. For the first time in months, maybe years, I allowed myself to imagine a future that wasn't tainted. One where love wasn't a weapon, where trust wasn't a trap. I still ache for Ethan and Chloe. I always will. I'll remember Ethan's crooked smile when he finally balanced on 2 wheels, Chloe's tiny hand clutching mine as she crossed the street. Those memories are carved into me, untouchable by lab reports or court decrees. But grief has edges, and over time you learn how not to cut yourself on them. I know I'll never be their father in blood, but I was their father in action. That truth lives in me, even if it never lives on paper. The life I'd known ended with a circle of foil glinting in the morning sun. But sometimes endings carve out space for beginnings you never expected. I don't pretend it's easy. Anger still flickers under the surface, sharp and ready. But it no longer owns me. It fuels me, keeps me standing tall as I walk forward into a future I choose, not one handed to me by deceit. I closed my eyes, breathed in the night air, and made a promise to myself. Whatever comes next, I'll write it well. Not for Rachel, not for Tom, not for anyone who ever tried to steal my life out from under me. For me, for the man who didn't break when the truth came crashing down. And maybe, just maybe, for the woman sitting next to me who kissed me without lies.
Subscribe and stay one step ahead of cheaters. And trust me, the next story makes this one look like a fairy tale.